After Jiraiya, a man stated to make shinobi of all nations tremble since the time of war, fell against the almighty pain, many shinobi in Konoha have wondered what could have gone differently for Jiraiya to have survived, with Tsunade herself even gazing at an Orochimaru who's perhaps changed from his ways, wherein she states that, Orochimaru, if you'd just become like this sooner, Jiraiya might not have been dead. So what if Orochimaru, the serpent who searches for eternal life, actually did join his dear friend? Could the two Sannin kill a god? Let's find out. Shooting for 20k, let's go. And opening the matchup to first try and determine not just how strong Orochimaru is so that we could compare Orochimaru to him, but also Jiraiya's original performance against Pain, let's first begin by noting that Fanbook 2 states that the Sannin are a force said to be comparable to even the Gokage, which, just concerning numbers, would mean that each Sannin is above every Kage, and this being a reputation sort of gig, which Jiraiya lives up to, as does not only the second anime profile guide state, he has superb abilities worthy of his reputation, but even Databooks 2's glossary section states that, though often called a pervert, he is, as expected, one of the legendary three capable of outstanding power worthy of his name. Furthermore, even Obito chides Pain in having his hands full against Jiraiya, and so thus Obito believes he lived up to his reputation. We know that Orochimaru also has fulfilled his reputation as well through the fact that he could actually battle Old Man Hiruzen, who, despite being nerfed, was stated in that very battle to be worthy of what it means to be Hokage, that being, as Fanbook 1 notes, to stand above the entire shinobi world, which the third anime profile guides actually corroborates the two being evenly matched as said in Fanbook 1 by stating that Orochimaru doesn't just possess practically the same taijutsu as Hiruzen, but is also of the same level as Hiruzen while posed as the Kazekage, whom he also killed. Many medians hail such to be an assassination, as they also hail his murder of Hiruzen to be an assassination, possibly implying that Orochimaru had killed Rasa through a fight, furthering that above the Gokage power. Even if we are to dial the clock back over just about a decade, Orochimaru is still implied to have been a rather perfect choice for Hokage, although his birthday column states, despite his many wartime accomplishments, misgivings about Orochimaru's ideology cause him to be passed over for the position, with Orochimaru later implying that he thought it was a shame that he was passed over for someone like Minato who didn't live up to the hype that was surrounding him at the time, implying that it was first and foremost Orochimaru's evil ideology that locked him out of the position, not anything to do with might or any power sort of notion, which further helps solidify his Hokage level that some will try to often dispute due to Hiruzen's aforementioned mental afflictions, which even in and of itself is fundamentally ignorant of Orochimaru's having to stab his own hand to stop himself from crying, and even from his own mouth he admits that he wasn't ready to take on his sensei. He wasn't ready to end the life of the one person who truly cares about him. So thus, through their reputation and fulfillment of such, both Orochimaru and Jiraiya are quite relative. However, we could take this even further by noting a few other supporting notes for this idea. The first of which comes from Databook 2, which states Jiraiya is a powerful shinobi on par with Orochimaru, and the second is that Ebisu states that it takes a Sannin to beat a Sannin. Furthermore, we also just have innumerable other comparisons, like even Pain himself complimenting the peculiarity of Jiraiya's arsenal by stating that both he and Orochimaru are unique in their arsenals, which is quite good stock for the supplement of the One Decade 100 Ninja Guide, which states that this is the ideal three-man cell renowned throughout the world as the legendary Sannin. Orochimaru with his wide variety of techniques, Jiraiya who excels in prolonged battles thanks to his vast chakra reserves, and Tsunade an outstanding medical ninja, their balance as a team is second to none. Furthermore, the summoning techniques used by all three are all in a class of their own, which all this not only corroborates that their ninjutsu is in a class of its own, although missing Tsunade, you have the two offensive monsters of the ideal trio whose balance is second to none. Jiraiya in the opening sequences of this fight, and even in some later engagements, uses many distinct jutsu, like his ability to not only just use toad oil bombs that can catch the same Konan who nearly killed Obito off guard, and flame bombs that are said to be a message of death according to the third data book, but also supporting jutsu for those like his toad subjugation, art of the manipulated shadow, which is stated in data book 3 to turn the body paper thin to not just subjugate the enemy's movements, but also allow for Jiraiya to have a direct counterattack from behind the back directly. And Jiraiya can even seemingly manipulate this to work without a shadow, as he does in the Pain fight, hiding against a wall to then blast flame bombs out at the prey to pass back. Let's also make a brief note that the third data book states that these flame bombs in particular are 10 times larger than the original ones, possibly implying just how amplified his jutsu is and how lethal it could be with the proper openings. Take the Big Ball Rasengan, which is stated to just be his maximum chakra output. Jiraiya even then summons toad dimensions filled with acid. He can submerge himself 328 feet underground to hide his chakra signatures, and even more. So let's ask now, right? What would need to happen for Jiraiya to come out with a win? What things in the original bout would need to change? Well, what would Jiraiya need in his pocket, to beat his one student who's no longer a prisoner to his human flesh and transcended to godhood, one who's said by Data Book 3 to be the invincible leader of the Akatsuki that even the notorious Akatsuki members obey? Well, it's simple. He needs a ton of pressure to be put on Pain. And Orochimaru's repertoire of jutsu is, if you could believe it, far better suited than Jiraiya's is. Orochimaru being taken down by Pain, at least by the confines of this scenario, presuming Jiraiya is still the main focus, is practically zero. I'm gonna be honest here. The reason being is that Orochimaru is almost unkillable. When fighting a same Four Tails Naruto that'd be above the Three Tails version that stayed to be a threat to the entire shinobi world, Orochimaru gets all of his internal organs completely ripped through and he simply reattaches them via snakes. He then has more taxing jutsu like the Oro Rebirth, which he used to heal entire arms, even come back from basically being incinerated in the anime, which shouldn't sound inconsistent. The reason being is because Sasuke, while using this, could survive the literal Amaterasu, hailed as the strongest physical attack. Orochimaru then has a lot of other options to keep the pressure high. The first of which is through his innumerable snake summons. Examples of said summons would be firstly the Mandala of Endless Snakes, which is stated to be in Data Book 3, countless miniature snakes that all have poisonous capability. He also has multiple restraint snakes. An example of that would be the Twin Snakes Curse Jutsu, which are stated to be orders of magnitude beyond typical snakes, hence to why Sasuke could restrain both Jugo and Suigetsu with these. He also has the very same snakes that he used to restrain Four Tails Naruto that are even faster than himself. And another interesting point to tie in here is that he doesn't care about his snakes, which, sounds obvious, right? Like how Sasuke uses them to tank Deidara's bombs. So I suppose you can make the case that, for Orochimaru being put down by Pain, even worse because he has to get past these defenses on top of killing the basically impossible to kill Orochimaru. Now, let's tighten this up a bit. Every snake thus far cannot be absorbed and would require a Shenron Tensei from the same Diva Path who isn't currently on the battlefield. The 8-headed serpent Hydra is a technique which Orochimaru has access to, which I brought up years ago before really anyone else even noticed, and that fact would be that it's a technique that's not directly of Orochimaru, but more of an external summon to Orochimaru, which Data Book 3 completely agrees with in implying multiple levels of autonomy and even calling it Orochimaru's vehicle, while simultaneously comparing it to a dragon god. Now, the Hydra's good stock also comes from it being listed as one of only 6 S-rank jutsu in Data Book 3, sitting alongside others like Sasori's 100 puppets that destroyed an entire country, Sasuke's Kirin that bombed the entire Uchiha hideout, Pain's 9 Phantom Dragon Seal that seals literal bijou into the Gedo statue, Naruto's Rasen Shuriken that's said to have borderline infinite attacks on a cellular level, and Shio's life destructibility. So to argue that the Hydra isn't of the highest level ninjutsu to master is pretty disingenuous, and while I'm not directly claiming it's a Sage Mode level increase, I think the arguments for said conclusion are especially fair considering the narrative for both Naruto and Sasuke taking on Sannin mentors who are then beaten with their higher forms by 2 of the strongest Akatsuki members. So when you consider, it alone is also just above a peak Orochimaru, we then have it's narratively similar to Sage Mode, it's the highest level ninjutsu possible, and it's capable of both offense and defense, and it's above Orochimaru, which in full comparison is even quite similar to Tsunade and how she also has a higher form that many people will equate to Sage Mode level, and if you do, it's only fair to do the same for the Hydra. However, let's take this a bit further for the full implications of what the Hydra actually has to offer. Firstly, it's noted to be Orochimaru's most powerful technique, which is extremely noteworthy as he noted multiple times to basically have every single jutsu in Konoha, which is another possible end to confirm it to be a peak level ninjutsu, likely even comparable to Sage Mode, and therefore extremely threatening to Pain. Moreover, this technique will actually be more threatening to Pain than it ever was for Itachi, for the sole fact that Pain's only real sealing method outside of the 9 Phantom Dragon Seal, that he never uses in combat, is his Chibaku Tensei, which means he also probably couldn't even use this in Amegakure, and it's already a hard technique he pulls off only at the end of fights. So now you have this other snake summon that's a monstrous ant beyond Orochimaru that can't be taken down by pain, at least very easily, that is. Furthermore, within this very Hydra, Orochimaru was actually confident that he could totally fight and deal with anything Itachi's invincible Susanoo had to offer, which means the Hydra alongside the other snake summons should be a pressure threat to Pain. Furthermore, these could then allow for Orochimaru's greatest method of attack that basically seals the win for Jiraiya, having every opening he could possibly want and then some, that being Orochimaru's to Edo Tensei. However, before getting into that, let's first note that Jiraiya is stated to be on the road to victory when facing the Paz one-on-one. However, he can actually take the pressure of all 6 at once. This argument comes from the end of the fight where we see that Jiraiya gets his arm ripped off when caught off guard and already began deactivating his Sage mode, which he actually has 2 versions of. The first being this initial one here, and the second being when he gets more Senjutsu and begins to transfigure with his face getting more, red markings to it and whatnot. Now, here, whilst missing an arm, something Data Book 3 states isn't a condition to be fighting in, and in the initial Sage mode, he gets attacked by all 6 paths at the same time, which are trying to kill him. However, we cut away, and then we return, and we have the conclusion that he survived and brought one of the paths into the actual Gamahori Keke barrier, which means he obviously survived the barrage. Now, what many people, however, will do is they'll play skeptic to this and argue, well, how do you know that all 6 actually engaged him as opposed to just 1? Well, this is virtually an argument from ignorance, as absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but let's engage it. Firstly, we know that the following return to the outside world shows the previous area that Pain was standing on completely destroyed, meaning that either Pain or Jiraiya fought enough with attacks to completely wreck the entire environment around them. Secondly, we know the anime actually does give a direct answer to what happened and such, and it says it was, Shinra Tensei's and Ashura Path missiles, which probably isn't an exaggeration to assume so. And furthermore, to confirm that there was a fight that actually ensued, Jiraiya's birthday column actually states for the latter end of the fight that, quote, thus, his battle to the death against Pain begins. Jiraiya's years of combat experience allow for him to hold up against everything Pain throws at him. Even after losing an arm, Jiraiya does not give up the fight. However, Pain's barrage of powerful attacks eventually pierce Jiraiya's heart, implying the ultimate idea, as the anime illustrates, that Jiraiya did fight off and parry off all 6 paths at once before ultimately losing later, while only in a version 1 state of Sage mode and missing an arm, so it's really not a bad anti-feat or anything like that. Now, Naruto Storm Generation said to have about an hour worth of additional anime content, give or take, actually shows Jiraiya not just fighting without even enough chakra to use her Sengon, but even implying that he was holding back for the entire fight until now due to his resolve to kill his once loved student. Meaning that for Jiraiya physically, he's a fighter above basically any of the paths individually and can survive the full pressure of all the paths briefly, but would get, overwhelmed with time. The latter game implication could also allude to him being above more than just one path as well, but I digress. So, for him, the pressure he needs is just to keep one of the 2 paths distracted while he just picks them off. And Orochimaru already should be doing that through just his basic jutsu alone, which is still an arsenal implied by the 1 Deku 100 Ninja Guide to basically encapsulate all the jutsu in Konoha as we mentioned. Meaning thus you're looking at Jiraiya, who's above any path, and Orochimaru who can combat any path, can't be killed, and can give Jiraiya the openings to fight any path, and ultimately use the Frog Song to win with Ma and Pa, who are also Sage Mode level fighters. But what does this actually mean? What does winning actually mean? How do the 2 Sannin actually win here? Well, Jiraiya in chapter 381 states that he must uncover the truth even if he faces death, arguing that he must for the fact that nobody can get this close to Pain. Jiraiya's goal here is primarily intel about the truth of who Pain actually is. The back of volume 42 states, the identity of Pain, who is called a god, is 6 warriors who possess the Rinnegan. Among them, Jiraiya senses the likeness of his former student, Yahiko, and arrives at the answer, but, ! End quote. Which seemingly implies that the goal is both he and Orochimaru must uncover who Pain actually is. However, this may not actually have to happen if Orochimaru is there. What do I mean? Well, essentially, sometime prior to this, Jiraiya sat down with Tsunade for one last time. They briefly reminisced when they all used to gang up on Old Man Third, and that things have changed. Jiraiya is now fully confident in righting his wrongs. He knows where the Akatsuki's leader is. He knows the location. He must find it. And Tsunade, in her drunkenness, sees through this and states, you couldn't bear the fact that you couldn't stop Orochimaru, so you kept track of his activities. To to which Jiraiya shows mere ellipses. A sign of mental affliction within Naruto. Jiraiya couldn't be Hokage because he couldn't save Orochimaru. He shall now use his freedom to right his wrongs and fight the Akatsuki's leader. So perhaps finding out anything to do with Pain's identity would be enough for him, since the fact that Orochimaru is now with him. He did save Orochimaru, so he doesn't need to prove it to himself any longer. Regardless, that's exactly what the two need to win. They just need to figure out Pain's identity, or at least enough of it, and then leave. However, what if they decided to stay? Instead of just completing the mission, what if they decided to outright pursue the rest of Amegakure for details surrounding the Akatsuki, and stumbled upon the other three paths? Or what if Nagato, after realizing he can't win, he just forced the other three paths out to perform a full-blown 6 paths rampage? Well, let's find out in the next section, where I have some pretty interesting points I think you'll enjoy. The two have fought through countless battlefields, and their bonds have not wavered according to Data Book 3. So, could the two Sannin actually fight all 6 paths at the same time? Yes. Orochimaru has the ability to circumvent Pain's #1 advantage through his 2 Hokage Edo Tensei in both Hashirama and Tobirama, with the latter being capable of blocking Hiruzen's Dragon Flame Bombs, which are hailed in the 3rd anime profile guides to be the strongest fire style in the entire world, using just a single sign water wall, something that Konoha's top jutsu master Kakashi needs 2 for at least. Tobirama then pushes a more offensive front, and even using his massive water dragon, prompts the bystanding Anbu to play off their previous remarks of Tobirama being able to use massive constructs without bodies of water, where they now state, so this is what it takes to be Hokage, as we noted earlier. So we can be sure of the fact that Tobirama and hence Hashirama are both of that beyond the 5 Kage, and hence Sannin tier fighter. So you're adding 2 more Sannin here. Hashirama alone is a literal monster for creating pressure due to his deep forest emergence, which is one of 3 jutsu in all of Data Book 3 to have the legendary diction, with the other 2 being the Amaterasu, the strongest physical attack, stayed to burn as hot as the sun, and the Flying Raijin, a jutsu stayed to transcend concepts like space and distance. This databook further states a legendary ninjutsu. By using chakra as the source of life, the user creates massive trees and controls them at will, using them for offense, defense, and even capturing enemies, making it an all-powerful technique. Without this technique, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the creation of the Hidden Leaf Village would not have been possible. Other anime guidebooks even hail it as a heavenly gift of extraordinary power, even in context to the Akatsuki suppression arc, with this very same guide stating that Tobirama used to flood battlefields with tsunamis of water style. Furthermore, the 3rd anime profile guides gives us a jutsu that this could be in reference to, that being the water style water shockwave, which is stated to be, quote, streams of water gathered into a tornado and made to explode at full velocity. The impact is similar to a huge tsunami. So now, you're looking at a Jiraiya who's above any path one-on-one, as we mentioned, a threat that multiple paths would have to have their full attention on to actually beat Ma and Pa, who have the ultimate win con in the Gamma Rinsho, plus have physicals rivaling Sage Mode Naruto and Jutsu that Pain himself mentally concedes are fast, Orochimaru, who basically can't be killed and would pressure multiple paths and at least one path, and then Hashirama and Tobirama, who could take out at least 2 paths of the fight, at least in terms of how much pressure they could put on, and that's even if the paths could eventually take down the 2 Edos, because of the fact that even when Hiruzen was doing it, he would blast their legs off with, bombs, and it was to no avail because they'd simply just regenerated, and it's not like some of these background paths are going to be able to seal it away or anything like that. Pain has an area of advantage I think he'll probably engage, and that's actually taking the fight outside. In Data Book 3, Pain's Rainmaker Jutsu is stated to allow for him to sense every drop of rain, and thus he could have a better counter to the countless ninjutsu being fired at him by just being able to sense them at an earlier point, which this, however, would also amplify Tobirama's water style and correlating jutsu. For in the anime, we also know that even against the aforementioned Hiruzen said to stand above basically the entire world physically, Tobirama could emerge out of the water and completely lock him into a chokehold to attempt to drown him, something that the human path has already been thus susceptible to in the original fight when Jiraiya pulled him underwater. And even if we aren't going to take the anime rendition into account, as its liberties are prominent for sure, Tobirama should still have a massive water style buff just for being on water, something the bystanding Anbu directly imply within the manga in that Hiruzen fight in complementing his water style that blocked the flame bombs, which we just discussed. But all in all, had Orochimaru ever reunited with his dear friend all that time ago, he would have saved Jiraiya. like probably 8 or 9 out of 10 times. I mean, it's actually really hard for Pain to win here, and I know it sounds crazy to say like Pain's gonna lose to just 2 Sannin when he already beat 1 Sannin, but it actually does make sense. So if you guys disagree, let me know, and I contend with the arguments I made. If you think Pain has a way to win, then let me know that way as well. So yeah, also be sure to subscribe, hype the video so more people can see it, as it's greatly appreciated. But more importantly than all of that, may God bless you all. Love you guys.